Okay, this is new to me, doing this through YouTube. I'm also going to try and share this onto Facebook. Now, the lady who I've invited on, she will be coming on. At the moment, she's literally just pulling into her drive, and she's just sent me a video of herself caught up in all the snow, and it looks like she's having fun with it. I'm also just sharing it out onto Facebook so that people can see that I am live now, and hopefully that will enable people. Now, anybody who's got Google Hangouts can actually click on to can send me their Google Hangouts address, and I can actually add them into the conversation also. So it doesn't have to be just me sitting here talking to you or a guest. So you can, it's kind of like ringing in to a radio show, very similar sort of thing. So while I'm waiting for this lady, what is interesting is, as people know, MARIAS doesn't just help girls who have been groomed and raped. We do also help people who have been victims of Sharia, and I do support Muslim women. And a lot of people do get sort of a little bit knocked over that, but I'm not there to please everybody else. I'm there to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. And I believe that this is the right thing to do. I believe it is right that we work with people, and I believe that it's right that Muslim women are given a voice, because too many times are Muslim women put into the shadows, and they suffer abuse too. They suffer immense abuse. Now, that's not to say all Muslim women suffer abuse, and it's not to say all Muslim men abuse Muslim women, but it is happening, and it's happening on a vast scale, and it's a scale that, to me, certainly needs to be addressed. It certainly can't just be ignored. If we ignore the issue, then we are guilty to a degree of enabling people to abuse people. Now, I know that we've got, at the moment, there's an ongoing investigation into Sharia councils. They call them councils, but in truth, they are courts. And when you say that there are Sharia courts, you're automatically told, no, 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 these are councils, they're not courts, they're councils. Well, if I go and see a counsellor can't get me a divorce if I'm married. A counsellor can't marry me if I want to get married. So therefore, they must be courts, or they wouldn't be able to divorce women and men from each other. They just wouldn't be able to do it. So all of this, you know, it's this constant claim that they are Sharia councils is just not true. It's just not true. So like I said, I'm waiting on a lady. I'm just waiting for her to sign in, and once she's signed in, she will be able to, you'll be able to see her and myself, and we will both be able to have a little chat and talk things over. Because I think there's a lot of things that Muslim women go through, and there's a lot of things that happen with regards to Muslim women, and people are often completely unaware of the things that do go on, the things that do happen to Muslim women. And I actually do believe that, I actually think there are a lot of Muslim women that are raped and groomed within their own communities, and they can't step outside of that community to raise the alarm of the fact that it's happening, because they're not permitted to. This is not acceptable in my country. It just is not acceptable. Now, you'll notice that my light keeps going a bit odd. It's because I've got Christmas lights on. So if anybody can't see me properly, then you need to just let me know, and I'll adjust my lights to hopefully get this up and running. So if you can all just sort of bear with me, as soon as we've got, as soon as I've got Candace on here, I'm just letting her know. I'm just letting her know.
Hello?
Hello, and you see, there I was patiently waiting.
Yeah, I figured it out.
Oh, we've lost your sound for a minute then.
Oh,
Are you on your phone or on your computer?
on my computer.
Okay, I can hear you now, but every now and again it cuts out. Let's just try
Yeah.
your stuff now.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. So the reason I decided to do this with you, Candace, is you were the lady that showed me how to do this. So if we get it wrong, we blame you, not me.
Okay, all right. No problem.
Now, for anybody who is listening to this live right now, one thing that we need to make clear is, first of all, you are a convert to Islam. Yes? And she's disappeared on me again. That was a good start. Candace? Hopefully she can try adding, I'll try adding her again and see whether or not we might have just lost her. Let's just see. She should still be there, but okay, I don't understand why I can't hear her. It's very frustrating. It's taken me a long while today to figure out how this all works. So while Candace is getting herself sorted out, hopefully we'll resolve this problem. And if she can hear me, she'll hang up and she'll let me add her again. This lady converted to Islam and she was actually married to an imam. And she has got quite a fascinating story of the fact that there she is. I think we've got her back now. Let's just see. I thought we had her back, but we haven't. It says she's joined, but at the moment I can't see or hear her. So like I said, she converted to Islam. She was married to an imam, but she has gone through immeasurable abuse, which I find shocking. And I think that the only way people are going to know that this does happen to Muslim women is if we actually have these conversations. And if we don't have these conversations, how will we ever understand that they suffer too? But what's also interesting is Candace has actually supported Marias for quite a long time now. In fact, I'd probably say well over a year. And she supports what I stand for. And I thought it would be interesting to show that whilst people scream the word Islamophobe, you're an Islamophobe, Candace is one of many Muslim women who doesn't scream the word, and we have her back. She doesn't scream the word Islamophobe at me. And she has supported Marias now for, I would say, over a year, Candace.
I'm sorry.
You've supported Marias now for well over a year, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And I was just saying, you're actually a convert to Islam.
I am.
And you were married to an imam, I believe.
Yes, I married him whenever I first converted to Islam, and that was a long time ago. It was about 10 years ago, and I don't know about it because it was only a religious marriage, but the guy was trying to human traffic me pretty much to his country to babysit his children, and I believe that he was trying to get his one of his relatives citizenship here in the USA, and that is because he wanted us to get married in the court in his country. But whenever I got my visa, it was in Arabic, and later on, after that relationship dissolved, after I left, I learned Arabic, and then I read the visa, and it was in his brother's name. And for me, that was kind of alarming that he, after we married, was going to take me to his country, leave me there for 6 years, only come back and see me every 6 years. And he wanted to leave his children with me. And then he was going to get another wife and come back. So for me, that was very alarming. And like, I didn't know anything about Islam. I was a brand new Muslim, a convert to Islam. And I was very gullible because I didn't know anything about green cards or people using people. I come from a place where people are honest and they have integrity. They don't use people to get ahead. As far as that's my life experience. So I didn't know like there's those type of people in the world. But yeah, there the imam. I actually told my fellow converts what was happening after we got married, and they told me, "Oh no, you're not going to go with him, and what he's doing is wrong." And so they helped me get out of that situation. But I would have actually ended up over there because I didn't know any better. I was really young and dumb and naive. And of course, I wanted to be a true Muslim, a good Muslim. So I looked for somebody who was well educated. He had his PhD in Islam, in fiqh and usul fiqh, and Islamic jurisprudence, which is Sharia law. And he studied in Medina University in Saudi Arabia. And that's not his country of origin, but he was very religious, and I thought I could learn a lot from him because I wanted to be a true Muslim and the best Muslim I could be, right? And I am glad I didn't fall into that trap, and I'm sure there's lots of girls out there that have, or maybe they fell into bad relationships because somebody in the community got them to marry somebody who had ill intention.
So when you married this,
are the ones who rescued from him too. So, yeah, it was crazy.
So when you and I chatted over a period of time, one thing that's been apparent is that you fully supported what I do, how I try to issues that you're seeing.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, you've got a bit of a negative feedback on yours, I think. When you and I first started talking and you started following what I do and how I do it, one of the things that you noticed is the amount of hatred that I do get and the amount of screams of Islamophobia and racist that I get on a regular basis. In your opinion, with what you've gone through and the fact that I support Muslim women and I do my best to try and help Muslim women, what would you say to those people who claim I'm an Islamophobe and a racist and a bigot and a fascist and a Nazi?
I would say probably you care more about Muslim women and the abuse that they face than the Muslim community, because you actually rescue these women who are in these situations where they are being human trafficked, or they're being physically abused or emotionally abused or raped. And for the Muslim community, they don't actually support women who are not conforming to the role that they should. And even then, there's a lot of xenophobia and racism and bigotry within the Muslim community. Islam is a religion, and most of the pushback I think you face is because your organization's name MARIAS, Mothers Against Radical Islam and Sharia Law. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people, they just see that and they say, oh, she hates Islam. And that's not true. You are against radical Islam. There's a lot of Muslims that are against radical Islam. I'm against radical Islam. I'm against extremism. I love democracy. I love my country. I love my culture. And I like the parts of Islam that are spiritual, not the parts that want to become the government, right? Not the parts that have to do with penal codes and criminal laws. That to me is garbage. I believe that, all religions, if they're going to be peaceful, they have to respect other people. And that means, being less religiously obnoxious and less annoying. And there's a lot of xenophobic behavior from Muslims too, towards others who are not Muslim. We see it, a lot in the Muslim community. That's why there's different communities. There's a Pakistani community, there's an Arab community, there's a Moroccan community. And these communities don't like to work together because they hate each other, right? A lot of the time. And they all want to have their own show. They want to put on their own show.
Isolated. Yeah. As a Muslim convert, you're actually isolated a lot by people who are not converts, who were born Muslim. Now, something that you and I touched on last night when we were chatting is that we both believe that I should have the right to criticize any faith religion, ideology. I personally see it as an ideology.
Yeah, you should.
But I have the right to critique it. And I think that to show that I'm not afraid to ask questions, and whether you've been Muslim, non-Muslim is irrelevant. One of the things that I find fascinating, as I said to you last night, they refer to it as being a religion of peace. A lady called Shireen Kadozi, who I've got immense respect for, she did an interview where she said Islam is not just a religion of peace, it's a religion of peace and war. And pretending that the war part of it doesn't exist, the jihad part of it doesn't exist, the fact that historically, if you look at the 7th century, they had the right to take that which their right hand possessed, which referred directly to sexual slavery, that if you've got Muslims in today's modern society that take it as the literal word of God, and therefore their duty is to emulate the Prophet, then that would justify all of these actions. Would you agree or would you disagree?
No, I agree that there is a lot of people who take the religion literally, and they take things, and they, in the 7th century, there was a lot of conflict and a lot of war, and Prophet Muhammad lived during that time. So, of course, there's, that in the historical references. But a lot of people, they take the historical references and they're like, they want to apply it to today. That's where extremism and radicalism comes from. And I'm completely against radicalism, extremism, and especially violence. Nobody should use violence to justify, their religion, or attack other people, whether they're apostates, ex-Muslims, they're non-believers, they're atheists, whatever. I mean, or secular, right? Even I'm a secular Muslim myself, but nobody should have the right, or nobody should think they have the right to use violence against others because they do not conform to your ideology. And there are those that do that. And it's really confusing. And I think in the UK, it's really confusing for the Muslims there that are growing up there, because when Muslims, they come to the West, they actually can, engage in their religion for the first time and decide what they want, and they become more religious. But when they have these religious scholars from back home teaching them to be like Muhammad, the literal interpretation, that's how you get people confused, and then they end up joining ISIS. They need leadership that says, okay, you shouldn't take this literally. This is a 7th century historical reference from the days of Prophet Muhammad. We're not going to apply this today. This is not appropriate. You know what I'm saying? And that's where things get confusing. It's like a gray space, because Muslims live in this bubble, like they don't want to hear any criticism at all, and that's where they get the deflection of Islamophobia, is criticizing Islam whenever they might be allies with people who are criticizing them, like yourself. They're, you're an ally with Muslims. There's a lot of Muslims in your community that are silenced. A lot of times these people are silenced and they can't come out. Even leaders, they might be silenced to stand up against domestic violence, or stand up against community violence, or religious violence towards non-Muslims, because of the extreme level of literal interpretation in the community. I see that from what I see in the UK, is that people who speak out against Islam, all of a sudden you're a bigot, but they can be bigoted towards everyone else. And it's like a reverse racism. And even Muslims, they do that with each other. You know what I'm saying?
Like, so what about people say, I mean, I get told that there can't be reverse racism because I've never suffered colonialism, and apparently I owned slaves. Well, as I said to you last night, I've never owned a slave in my life. And I'm pretty certain if you research my family history and followed it all the way back, you would find that I didn't own slaves in my history either. But the fact is, to hold me and the rest of this country accountable for something that happened so many years ago, to me seems like that would be like me saying, if you look at the history of Islam, it did wage war against non-Muslims. There are over 160 verses of violence. You do have abrogation, which means that the peaceful verses that you probably follow are replaced by the violent verses. Therefore, these people can justify their actions. So that's kind of like me saying, well, yeah, but, 1400 years ago, but I know that's what happened. The difference is, I'm not trying to enslave them. They are trying to bring the century to the 21st century.
Yeah, well, the 7th century doesn't always work here in this century. We have a plural global society where everybody respects other people, and all the other religions that I deal with are very peaceful and loving. We don't see jihadists developing and joining terrorist groups for, to attack, different policies and these things. And I, for one, you can't blame the West for all of your problems. Yes, there have been dictatorships, there has been imperialism and colonialism, interference with, other countries from Western nations. However, the people can operate in a way to make their society better without conflict. And it's really, really unfortunate that, of course, it's not going to happen everywhere. But, Japan was attacked by the USA. They had bombs dropped on them. And they didn't go into civil war. They rebuilt their country and they made it into a great nation. Right? So, you can't keep holding on to the past and blaming people to attack them. You have the opportunity to build what you want in your country. And, sometimes you have to work in governments with governments that are not ideal, right? If you live in a theocracy or a dictatorship or whatever. But, the whole blaming the West for all your problems thing is nonsense. It really is.
It really is nonsense. One of the things that I get thrown at me quite a lot is, the West invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. And as I said to many Muslims that I've spoken to, I never voted Tony Blair for a start. But those who did, I know for a fact, didn't vote for Tony Blair expecting him to take us into an illegal war. Now, we have armed servicemen in this country. And when they signed up and took what they call the Queen's Shilling, they didn't sign up expecting Tony Blair or anybody else to take them into an illegal war, nor did they expect to have to go and serve out in these countries. But for a lot of our armed forces, that was their job. And once you're signed up, you are signed up for the foreseeable future until your time served. And yet we've seen our soldiers spat on in Luton by Islamist extremists. We have seen our soldiers abused. We've seen our soldiers beheaded in broad daylight on the streets in our country. And the constant excuse is, well, you invaded our countries. But I kind of look at it this way. If you want to defend your country and you say that's your country, even if you were born here, why are you living here?
Yeah.
It's a harsh way to look at it or a fair way to look at it?
No, I think it's fair. If you migrate to a country, why would you migrate to a country that you hate, first of all? And there is a lot of exploitation on behalf of immigrants who just want to come and get welfare benefits or whatever. I've seen it with my own eyes in the Muslim community here. And I'm sure other immigrant communities do it as well. They'll come here, collect benefits, and go back home and stay in their country and live like a king, right? Because they have a really good income with the welfare that they get here. Or they just come and they live on welfare instead of working. And the problem is like, I study sociology. So if you know anything about America's history, it became a great nation because of the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. It's an actual book that was written about democracy in America, or how this country came about, right? Sorry, I'm kind of conflating two different things, I think, but people here work their butts off. They work from sunup to sundown, and this was a cultural practice here in the United States where people worked until they had something better than their neighbor. And they worked really hard. They worked nonstop. They didn't even take holidays or anything, right? Long days, long hours. and that made America great, and that built America's economy. Now in the Muslim world, you know, people, they they work like traditional jobs and stuff like that, but they don't have that culture. And that's the problem. When a lot of the Muslims, they come to the West, they don't have that culture, right? Where they work nonstop to have something better. And those who do actually are very economically successful. I've seen lots of immigrants come to this country that are Muslim, that work their tailbone off, and they have businesses and they have more money than I ever had, and they came with nothing. But there's a large portion that think, oh, I will just take the easy route and go to welfare, right? Because they're lazy, basically. And it's unfortunate, you know, we don't have money in our country to even pay for our own homeless people who are living on the street, you know, and you know, there has to be limits. I feel like immigration laws should be reformed here in our country. Um, Most definitely. I mean, I think we should have welfare, a safety net to help people, but we should also be realistic that, you know, there's limitations, right? There should be limitations. We're only helping the most vulnerable people who really, really need it, and not people who are just exploiting it.
Especially in this country, what we're seeing is a massive change in demographic, because we as not as people of this country, we kind of, our government have put us in a position where if a woman wants to stay at home and raise children, then she's frowned upon, she's looked down upon, which kind of forced a lot of women to go back into employment and therefore could only have 2 children, maybe only 1 child. So where we used to have bigger families, we now have smaller families. And what we are seeing is, first of all, we are seeing Sharia law courts applied in our country. They try to argue and say they're not Sharia courts. They say they're Sharia councils. I disagree. They're not councils, they're courts. We're also seeing the fact that they will say, well, you know, it's my right to have 4 wives, as in polygamy. Now, to me, this is totally and utterly unacceptable in any modern Western country. It's called bigamy. You know, men and women go to prison for bigamy.
Yeah.
Their argument will always be, if a man can have, say he's got a wife and he's got a girlfriend on the side, that's, you know, to what they're saying is it's no different. But I think there's a huge difference between a Sharia wife and a man who's having an affair. Purely because if you were having an affair and you were miles, but I'm going to kick you to the curb and your backside's going to hit the doorstep on the way out. And Muslim women don't always know that they are Sharia wives either.
Yeah.
Do you find that you see a lot of that?
Oh, no, we don't have Sharia law courts here that I know of. I haven't seen anything like that, but I have seen polygamy in our communities where men have more than 1 wife. And generally, it's been like in a more exploitative situation where a immigrant man will marry an American woman and still have his wife back home. And he doesn't necessarily build a life for the woman here. He's just taking advantage of her while he's sending money, building a life for his real wife back home. As far as like real marriages where the man is actually trying, I have not actually seen any polygamy relationships where they have worked out at all. You know, generally it's been an immigrant man who wants to have an American wife, and then he has his cousin as a wife, and he always treats his cousin better. The American woman is just for sex, I guess. So
Well,
that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. Yeah.
There is definitely this whole attitude that Western women are seen as being whores and are treated as such. But what I found quite fascinating is one of the Muslim women that I've been giving support to now for 4 years, she herself is also referred to as being a whore because she's too westernized. She's dressed too westernized. Her clothes are too westernized. She doesn't wear the hijab. She's not dressed correctly. She's not pious enough. And because she is westernized, because she loves this country and she sees herself, I mean, as I said to you, I'm English. I'm not British, but she sees herself as being British. Again, she is then referred to as being a whore. Now, I believe you said that there is a word for it that you're referred to because you are not walking. I mean, sometimes you wear the
Yeah.
hijab,
In
sometimes.
Arabic, they say it's sharmuta, sharmuta. Um, yeah. So this is not your imagination. It really, really does happen. A lot of people would say, "Yeah, I work with Muslims. They're really nice. They're everything, you know." And I work with Muslims that are really nice. There are Muslims that are genuinely good and nice people, but there is this general consensus in this idea that if a woman is too westernized, she's not covered up, she's secularized, she's too free. And that means she's loose and she just sleeps with anyone, right? And it's a negative stereotype on women to put women down. And so in larger Muslim communities, you will see this kind of attitude really, really be detrimental towards Western women converts. And that's generally like people just try to take advantage of them because they know culturally American women or Western women, they date, they do have sex before marriage, and they view that as like, you know, somebody they can use and throw away like a toilet, right? And they do call them whores. They do. Yeah. And uh
If I told you that I get referred to as being a white whore, what would you say, in your opinion, that that was?
Yeah, no, I love my culture. I believe in dating before marriage. I believe in sex before marriage. And, you know, people, they think, oh my God, you know, that's a sin. Well, you know what? All the Muslims that I've known, they do date and they do go out and they have sex. Men are especially, uh, you know, not to blame in the Muslim community for their actions, but all the Muslims, they're dating. They're not religious. I'm not a religious Muslim. And I'm not religious intentionally because I find that kind of barbaric. And I tried marriage the traditional way, which was garbage, right? And I found it exploitative. I got married, and it was abused and exploitative and financially abusive. And in the end, the guy was just trying to get a green card. So I was like, what the hell is that? You know what I'm saying? And these guys all the time, when they get their green card, they go and they marry their cousin.
And they tried to actually traffic you, I believe, as well.
They do traffic. Yes, they do traffic. Uh, they try to get women to go to their country to, you know, have a vacation, meet their cousin or whatever. This is human trafficking. And it's not looked at that like from the Muslim community point of view. And even the leadership in the Muslim community, they don't address it. They don't care. They don't care about this is family violence, this is community violence against women, and it's not right. And they don't only do it to white American girls or non-Muslim girls. They do it to Muslim girls too. They do it to both. They do traffic even their own women, like they marry their sister to their cousin to bring them to the country. And sometimes they'll just repeat it repeatedly. If there's a divorced Muslim woman that nobody wants to marry, they just repeatedly have her marry somebody who needs papers and just take advantage of her. This is
So
abuse.
if I was to say to you that you obviously you've been on my, as I said, we've been on each other's Facebook now for maybe a couple of years, I believe. And in that time, you see the links that I share, you see the information that I put out, you know that I'm not making any of it up, that these things are really happening. And we do have mass grooming of children in this country by Muslim men. Now, a lot of times, and this is something I raised with you last night, is if I say this is a Muslim man who's raped and groomed and trafficked and raped this 13-year-old child, I am immediately met with, he's not a true Muslim. And I disagree with this. And the reason I disagree with this is, as I said to you, when Catholic priests raped little boys, they were Catholic priests. No Catholic turned around and denounced them as being Catholic priests at the time that they were raping those little boys. And we in this country, especially, I don't know what it's like in America, but with how Muslims basically, whenever they do something good, I mean, Sadiq Khan became London mayor. But they didn't say Sadiq Khan, London Mayor. They said Sadiq Khan, first Muslim mayor. So it was highlighted that he was a Muslim. So why is it okay to highlight it that somebody's Muslim when they do something that people would deem as, I mean, I don't think Sadiq Khan's a good man. I don't trust him, and I think he's a bit of a snake. But when he became mayor, everybody said, you know, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. I'm Muslim mayor. We need more Muslims in power. But when I say Muslim raped and trafficked a girl, I get told not a true Muslim. Would you agree that you've got Muslim men who do good things and Muslim men who do bad things, and just because there is a high proportion of Muslim men targeting predominantly white girls and trafficking them, and you see obviously the links on my page, what's your opinion of the fact that I put that information out there and I refuse to call them Asian and I refer to them as Muslim?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, just because they do a crime doesn't take them out of Islam, and it doesn't make them not Muslim if they are referring to themselves as Muslim. Muslims, they use identity politics, and they elevate their religion to like a higher status than race. So instead of saying, "Oh, Pakistani, Sadiq Khan is a Pakistani mayor," they say he's a Muslim mayor, and so that's more important to Muslims than their race. And so they elevated that to a master status. And so whenever they do good, they want to be acknowledged for doing what's good. But then whenever somebody does something bad, they try to distance themselves from that. And then they try to say, oh, that's not a true Muslim, because a true Muslim would not exploit or hurt other people, right? And so that's where they get that from. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, if they can highlight, and they want to highlight, and they want that to be their master status in public life all the time, then why can't you have a newscast and say, okay, this was a Muslim who raped? Because it's true, right? Just like Catholic priest raped.
Yep.
You know, is it the religion that motivated? No, it wasn't. We all know that Christianity didn't motivate the priest to, you know, rape, or, you know what I'm saying? But if they want to elevate that to their master status, and they want everyone to respect them as a Muslim first, and they refer to themselves always as Muslim in public life, then why not, you know? Unless they want to come out and they say, no, you know what, I'm Pakistani first, or I'm British first, or I'm English first, or whatever, right?
So you say that they don't do it because of their faith. And this is where, you know, like we said last night, we're not always going to agree on everything, and we can agree to disagree on things. I look at it this way. When you've got the verse that states that which your right hand possesses, and that is directly a quote referring to sexual slavery. Now, a lot of Muslims, not all, but a lot of Muslims believe they are in a state of jihad with the West. So therefore, to take that which their right hand possesses, which refers to concubines and sex slaves, they see it as being their absolute right. So therefore, they believe which explains why we had, you know, you see in the news about the Yazidi girls. They can justify their actions by going direct to the quote from the Quran and the Hadith. Now, I know that you don't live your life by the Hadith, but those Hadith are there. They do exist.
I believe there are quotes in the Quran that should not be taken literally at all. Actually, I don't take everything literally. I'm not a literalist, and this is the problem with fundamental Islam, that it borders on extremism. If they read the Quran and they take it literally, and these verses are there, it can be very dangerous. It can be very dangerous. And this is where it gets confusing for everyone, is because if you read that there and you say, okay, this condones sexual slavery of non-Muslim women, or, you know, their enemies or whatever, then of course, you know, that can be taken as literal and conflated by, you know, other parties that are extremist, and then they can disrespect and be more xenophobic. And this is the problem. There are quotes in the Quran that can, if taken literally, they will promote xenophobia and racism and bigotry, and it could cause harm to other people. You're right. There absolutely is. And I don't know about the UK because I haven't been there, but I know here in the USA, um, that is not that's not something that I've seen here that's extreme. I haven't seen grooming of young girls, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen. I know grooming of converts and marrying people off as for green cards and human trafficking, those types of things for converts is something that happens. But I don't know about if there is a group of young girls that are being groomed here. Um, if the Muslim community grows, I don't know if that would happen in the future, but I know that's been a really major big problem there in the UK, and it is directly related to the culture that these Muslims have come from, where sex is taboo, you can't talk about sex, and they feel like they can get away with taking advantage of people, and pedophilia might be something not talked about, right? Because they don't want to highlight it. Or in the case of women being raped, a lot of times they blame the women, and the women might get killed, or they might jeopardize their family honor, and so it's always the woman's fault, even if she's a young girl.
Well, you've also got the fact that they advise that if a woman is raped, that actually it's advisable that she marry her rapist so that she doesn't carry the shame. Now, you say it's cultural. I don't know if it is. If it's cultural, then that culture doesn't fit in my country, and it sure as hell doesn't fit in America's culture. But
It doesn't.
When you look at Pakistan, there is a documentary called The Hidden Shame of Pakistan, where little boys as young as 8 years of age are groomed and raped by up to 13 men at a time. We've got cases when you go out and you look at Saudi Arabia, women in burqas have been raped, and if they're raped, and they have to produce 4 male witnesses to testify to rape. If they can't produce 4 male witnesses, then they are seen as basically adulterers and can be stoned to death. And the problem I have is I find it very difficult to understand why somebody like yourself, of all the things you could, I mean, I've no problem with people believing in God. I mean, as I've said to you, I'm an atheist. But why Islam? Why not just believe in God? Why do you need Islam in itself to be able to believe in God?
Well, me, I converted to Islam a long time ago, whenever I was young and naive, and I was just interested in learning about Islam. And then I felt I agreed with it because of where I came from. What I grew up in was, a Baptist, Protestant area, and it went with what I already believed. So for me, for the last 11 years, I've lived around Muslims, and I just want to say, like, not all Muslims are bad. There are bad people who do seek to exploit and harm others, but there are a lot of really great Muslims also. And whenever I was disowned from my family, when I was, homeless, there was Muslims that actually helped me, and they have been my support base. So there has been a lot of really great Muslims. And for me, there's a lot of things I question about the faith, and a lot of things that I disagree with, a lot of practices that I disagree with. And I absolutely love my culture. I love democracy. I love my country. I don't believe in living like I'm living in the 7th century, first of all. But there's a lot of good things that Islam has done for me personally that I really identify with, and I really just want to keep going with that, rather than just, dropping off. And for me, it's important to me to be a good Muslim as far as following the good principles that make you a better person, right? And that's the thing. Like, people turn to religion whenever they're down and out, and they have a hard life, or they have a hard time, and they pray because they put positive affirmations for the kind of life they want to live, right? And so for me, it helped me focus and keep my life together. Whenever I was so depressed I could have killed myself or become an alcoholic or a drug addict. And I really enjoy a lot of Muslim culture, like food and fellowship and companionship, these types of things. Islam is more than just the one negative thing that people look at. There's a lot of good things in Islam too. And so for me, I agree with you, because you need to create awareness where there is people silencing and harassing women and being misogynistic and creating this culture of um, of hell for women, right? And so that's why I support Maria's, is because you actually have that voice, you give people that platform, you help women, not just creating awareness, but you help women escape from an oppressive Muslim situation where their family might be attacking them or forcing them to get married overseas, to human traffic them or whatever, that have been women that have been raped. They can't find that kind of support in their Muslim community. They can't. And you're courageous for actually standing up and saying, hey, I have a problem with this and I'm questioning this and I'm trying to figure this out. And that's why I love you, Tony, because that is amazing. Seriously.
So when I talk to you, and obviously I don't hide my opinion on this lot. I'm very open and very vocal about the fact that I will never ever see it as being a religion of peace. I do think it's misogynistic. I do think it does have too much violence in it. I do think that the fact that the peaceful verses that exist are superseded by the later violent verses, that to me is a major bone of contention, and I have a major issue with that. Now, that's not to say that Christianity, I am well aware that the Old Testament was full of violence. The difference is the Bible is a book. It's not supposedly the literal word of God. The Quran is supposed to be the literal word of God. Now, if it's the literal word of God, I would question what kind of God would justify a prophet who did go to war, who was a warmonger, who did force his brother, I think it was his brother, to divorce his wife so that he could marry her, that did marry a child bride, and that Muslims today think that this is all perfectly acceptable, that did introduce something like Sharia law, which would see women treated as being less than half the value of that of a man. I find these things, in my personal opinion, these things are oppressive. I think that it's a very backward thinking mentality. Now, that doesn't, again, as I said, I don't think all Muslim men are rapists and paedophiles and are brutal. I'm sure that, you know, I've told you before, Taj Hagi, I have immense respect for the man for going to Oxford University, because he teaches at Oxford University, and setting light to the burqa. Because he says his words, not mine, that they are filthy garments and disgusting rags, and he doesn't want women being forced to wear the burqa, the niqab, or the abaya. A young girl that I've been talking to for quite a long time now, she's 16 years old. Her father basically forced the abaya on her, which is the one with the meshing, and when she took the abaya off and she chose not to wear this anymore, she was living in such fear because her own father was threatening to kill her, that she pleaded with him to kill her because she couldn't cope with the stress of living under that perpetual threat all of the time. And she left Islam and she became an atheist. And I watched it on social media where she was bullied by Muslims, and to the point of coming offline because she didn't feel she could be vocal and speak out and say what she felt. There are several apostates that I speak to, and in this country they are living double lives. You know, they are a Muslim in one hand and then breaking all of what Islam is and what it's supposed to be with the other. I don't think people should have to live a double life, so I find it very difficult to accept that people find it as being a peaceful religion when it's also a political system. So it fascinates me that somebody like you who is very open, you've always been very open, very honest with me, and we've always had, you know, really good interaction. You've always interacted on my posts, and you're the first to call out when you see something that you think is totally unacceptable. You're one of the first on there to give your opinion, and you don't hold back on that. So I find that very difficult to understand, why somebody like yourself would find comfort in something that has all of those issues, and not find comfort in just believing in God and holding your faith very personal. But because I know you don't go to mosque, and you don't go to the imam, obviously after being married to one, I'm sure the last thing you want to do is go to an imam.
Yeah. Well, no, I actually I do go to an imam, but he is a born American convert to Islam. And he identifies with a lot of the challenges that other converts face. So he's a good go-to person, and he's not an extremist. So yeah, there is a lot of bigotry in the Muslim community. Just to touch on the hijab, Islam is not a monolith, and it's homogenous in some ways and not homogenous in other ways. And what I mean by that is the attitudes towards women are pretty homogenous with the headscarf, as it is an expectation that society has. But spiritual well-being is not necessarily an expectation. And that's one of the reasons why I took off the hijab, is because for me, I was going through hell with discrimination in employment, and going out in public with the hijab just shows people what your religion is. And I didn't want people to judge me for my religion first. I'm a person first. I'm an individual first. And a lot of Muslims don't think like that. They think I have to be a true Muslim, which means I have to show this in your face, right? And to me, that's not a humbling thing to do. A humbling thing to do is to, like, if you're in Rome, you do like the Romans, right? You do what the culture says where you're at. And a lot of Muslims, they say, okay, we have to be moderate, but they're thinking moderate in Saudi Arabia, not moderate in the West, right? And for me, this is moderate in my country, So for me, I separated the idea of religion in public life from religion as a private life. For me, I live religion in the private life now. And so I took off the hijab because other Muslims, they didn't care about my spiritual well-being. So people would ask me, where's my headscarf? But they wouldn't ask me, did you pray today? Let's go pray, right? So spiritual well-being, to me, if you don't care about my spiritual well-being, then how can you care about how I'm dressed? And to me, I found it obnoxious and annoying that I would repeatedly be homeless. Yes, I had Muslims help me in those situations, but I also faced discrimination from mosque and mosque leaders who treated me like a pariah when I was homeless. And so it's like a mixed bag of good and bad experiences. But when you're homeless and you go to the mosque and you're like, hey, I need help, and they look at you like, oh, you're a woman, where's your family? Okay, if you don't have a family, obviously you're a whore, so nobody wants you. We're not going to help you. You know what I'm saying? It's really frustrating to find that the Muslim leadership is like that. But then, there are good Muslims that actually do help you. And it's been my fellow Muslim sisters, the women, who actually have supported me the most. And power to all the Muslim women out there, because they do live in hell. They don't have the freedom that you have, Tony, to speak up and speak out against things that are wrong. And a lot of them are just brainwashed with nonsense. They think, they don't think that these bad things happen in their community. And that if you say something bad about a leader, or you say something bad about somebody else, that this grooming stuff is happening, they might think you're crazy. And then there are women who actually participate in grooming, right? They participate in recruiting women to human traffic them to get green cards or whatever their purpose is.
There has been cases, especially women who have converted to Islam, that have participated in grooming young white girls for Muslim men. That's happened on several occasions that we've come across that. And what I find, look, like I said to you, I believe that we have a right to religious freedom in this country, whether we like it or not. Religious freedom exists there. But I don't think any religion should supersede the religion of the country. Now, and I say that as an atheist, religion, to me, I find all religion quite abhorrent myself. And I think religion was created as a way to control the masses. Now, that doesn't mean to say, I mean, my mum believes in God, my father believed in God, but my father always believed that religion was just, it was a way of controlling people. That's hence where the saying, my father would say to me, you know, I put the fear of God in you. Well, why have I got to fear this God who is supposedly all kind and loving? Why have I got to fear him? That to me seems very unnatural. But what I find frustrating here is girls are being groomed on a regular basis. The numbers have become more and more astronomical. I put a link out the other day where 10 police officers from Rotherham were involved in grooming of young girls. Now, as yet, we don't know the names of these police officers, so we don't know their ethnicity. We don't know whether they had a religion or if they were religious. But the fact that the police turned their back on these girls, the social services turned their back on these girls. There have been boys that have been groomed and raped as well. I've got a couple of guys that have been in touch with me that were groomed and raped by Muslims. And there is this we had some, I think they were from, trying to remember where they came from, but they were from an Islamic country to be trained by our armed forces, and decided one night to go out, and they raped a man. And their answer for it was, well, we got drunk and we're not used to alcohol. Well, that's supposedly a haram. What was you doing drinking alcohol? And these things are becoming more and more prevalent. We've seen it in Germany with the game of Tarabush, brought in from an Islamic country, not brought in from a Western country. I would never come to America. I know in America, they're very, they are very religious, and they do believe in Christianity, and they follow their faith very stringently, not necessarily strict, but they hold their faith very dear, and they believe in God is very dear. And I would never come to America and begin to tell Americans, well, actually, you need to adopt atheism. I know you've got a problem with the atheists apparently out there. Apparently they're not very nice, the atheists in America. No. and I find that also, to me, I don't understand, how can you be an atheist and be an unkind person? Respect a person's right to their religion. We don't have the right to take somebody's right to whatever faith they want. We don't have the right to take that away, but we should have a right in our country to not allow it to supersede the faith of that country. Because I couldn't go to Saudi Arabia and drag atheism kicking and screaming to Saudi Arabia and expect them to actually tolerate it, because they wouldn't. And Christians,
well, you know what? I appreciate all the critics in the world, especially the atheists, because they can see things that other people are just kind of oblivious to. They live in bubbles and they're in denial about different things. So you guys actually pointed out, you know, and you are there to help make us reform and make us, you know, improve what we're doing with our life. You know, I mean, we don't want to be believing in something crazy. And I appreciate that. Even Prophet Muhammad, I told you yesterday that he was a critic of what was happening at his time. He walked around his city and he was like, what the hell is this? What are they doing? They're worshiping statues. So, I mean, if he was allowed to criticize, why can't other people criticize? And
according to Muslims, they would say that Muhammad was the perfect man. And I find that very difficult to swallow, because I don't see how you could be a perfect man and do some horrendous things. Because the perfect man, in my eyes and in my opinion, the perfect man wouldn't do the things that Muhammad did. You know, they wouldn't have gone to war. They wouldn't have slaughtered Christians in the masses. They wouldn't have. And I find it also fascinating. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Islamic countries, the second best-selling book next to the Quran is Mein Kampf.
Mein Kampf? Did you say Mein Kampf?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah.
So when you've got all this hatred towards the Jews, hatred towards non-Muslims, strike the neck of the unbeliever, you know, strike off their fingertips, etc. I find it, how can anybody turn around and say this was the perfect man? And that's why I have an immense respect for Shuri Devosi, because she's not afraid to say these things either. But what a lot of non-Muslims will say is, she's not a real Muslim. You can't be a real Muslim, because if you were a real Muslim, you would follow it in its literal form.
Yeah,
So
that's a
what,
contradiction in the faith. It's absolutely a contradiction that if somebody else did that, they would say, oh, they're not a true Muslim, but Prophet Muhammad did these things. And you have to, a lot of people say you have to follow the literal interpretation. Absolutely, that's a contradiction. And yeah, Prophet Muhammad lived in the 7th century, and that was a very rough period, I imagine, to live in. People were, surviving by survival of the fittest. You know what I'm saying? And it was tribal, and there was tribal warfare and everything like that. So, as far as his character, they say in Islam that they've documented his behavior and everything like that, and they want to emulate the good parts. And there's no problem with emulating the good parts. But when it comes to emulating things that are not necessarily relevant to today, that it should be put into the category of historical reference and not taken literally. And that's the problem that Muslims have today. They don't know how to dissect. Well, maybe that just doesn't apply today. Maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe this was, that's the difference between Christianity and Islam, is that at least Christians, they have kind of toned it down, and they've brought it into, a personal thing, and not something that is a governance plan, right? And so a lot of Muslims, they still are, they think that this governance plan for life is better, and then they're religiously obnoxious and religiously annoying to other people that don't want to follow the religion, and then they push back anybody who criticizes the faith, calling them an Islamophobe, when you're in the right to criticize the religion. Again, that's identity politics. But yeah, I mean, if you are a peaceful religion, you have to respect other people's opinions. You have to respect other people. You can't riot and, threaten people, use violence because people draw cartoons. And there was a large movement after the Charlie Hebdo attacks that everybody stood up for Charlie, because against what the extremists and the radicals did, including in the Muslim world. So people were standing up with Charlie everywhere.
That may have been what you saw, but what we saw was 10,000 Muslims take to the streets in London in absolute moral outrage. And I'll be honest with you, if you look on my YouTube, you'll find a video where I draw the most appalling drawing, because I'm no artist, but I actually drew my attempt at a picture of Muhammad, and I tore it up into little pieces, and I said, that's the difference. A cartoon can be torn up and discarded. But Charlie's life, you snuffed it out. That's a life you can't take back. It's just a piece of paper. And the fact that there's this morally offended, perpetually offended, and what we're finding, especially in the UK, is, I will often say, 10,000 Muslims came out to protest over a cartoon. Show me where those 10,000 were for 1,400 girls in Rotherham, when I can name 40 towns where grooming gangs are predominantly Pakistani, Afghan, some Iraq, but Muslim men have targeted predominantly white girls, have groomed them, raped them, trafficked them, tortured them. But there's no 10,000 Muslims out in protest over this. I find that morally corrupt.
It is. You're right. You're absolutely right. There should be 10,000 people in the Muslim community protesting the misogyny and the crimes that happen against women. And it's really unfortunate that, that they're not. It really is. I mean, I feel disgusted that they would protest over cartoons, but not protest over crimes against real people. And I think that's where there is a disconnect, I guess, between Muslims and the rest of the world, is that they really just don't realize that, maybe you should be more offended by those behaviors, instead of trying to cover up the misogyny and cover up, trying to say people are not really Muslim, and start standing up against those who are actually doing bad things in their community. And that means speaking up and not being silent.
And how do you feel about Sharia law operating in our country, and the fact that we do have, but we're constantly told Donald Trump raised the issue when he said that there were no-go zones in America, in the UK. And everybody, I saw a lot of the left in America, this is not the goddamn truth, this is a goddamn lie. And I'm sitting there thinking, mate, it's my country, and I'm telling you, there are areas in this country where as a non-Muslim woman, it would not be safe for me to go. And that varies from places in Birmingham to Luton, Tower Hamlets, where there are areas that have become Sharia zones.
Yeah. So here we don't have any no-go zones.
But Dearborn,
I've actually gone everywhere. Huh?
we've got Dearborn, Michigan.
Dearborn, Michigan, I've been there. I've actually been there. I went to the mosque. I went to the Mosque of America. It's a Shia mosque. I went there and I tried to take pictures, and they were like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And because they seen me as a white girl, and they're like, "Why is she taking pictures in the mosque?" But it was a really beautiful mosque inside. So, yeah, I actually went to Dearborn, Michigan, but I was wearing a headscarf, and when I wear a headscarf, I look Arab, and so for me, there's like no-go zones anywhere. But if I'm not wearing a headscarf, going into some areas, I wouldn't say it would be a problem, because here people are really, really secular in the Muslim community compared to the UK. As far as Sharia law, what I think about that is that there is Sharia law that has to do with the good religious things, right? That people want to pray and those things that are personal. That part of the belief you keep at home, just like canon law or Christian Judaic law. But the part that's in the public life that tries to interfere with politics, that interferes with government, those type of things need to be eliminated, especially like court systems, especially because it hurts women. It creates a double-edged sword for women to be silenced. And we live in the West. We have a judicial system and that we like, and that's part of our core values as our country, right? And I'm sorry, but they need to follow the law where they're at and not make other courts. I'm sorry, they just don't. They don't need to make them.
So what do you think of the fact that we've had mass demonstrations of Muslims where they're standing there saying, UK go to hell, UK burn in hell, UK soldiers burn in hell, UK police burn in hell, and they're actually calling for violence on our street. They're calling for violence against our armed forces, against our police. And yet the minute I criticize
that, absolutely is behavior that, you know, would criminalize somebody here in the United States. If you're calling for violence against soldiers or violence against anyone, the FBI investigates that kind of thing. And of course, if you are planning or support or even material support, that is considered terrorism. And I'm sorry, but if there's a lot of people that are doing it, then that needs to be addressed. It absolutely, they need to put their foot down in the UK and say, I'm sorry, that behavior is not going to be tolerated. If you come to our country, and or even if they're born in that country, you know, I would address it as terrorism if they are promoting violence or supporting violence against soldiers or the country. That way, you know, people.
It took absolute years. It took years to get Amjad Chowdhury locked up. So that shows you how difficult it is to make any kind of thing stick. I'm sorry, I left my Facebook on for people to comment notifications. So anybody who hears that little ping, I'll apologise, and that won't happen next time I do this. Now,
yeah. Well, I absolutely agree that they should be criminalized, and that should be criminalized behavior. If they are doing it out in the open and in a public space, they're saying that stuff, like, absolutely, that should not be tolerated at all. I know Amjad Chowdhury, I watched his stuff and I was just like blown away, like how the hell is he even out? Maybe he was working for the MI5. I thought maybe he was trying to, you know, identify people who supported his message, but like I was just like, how the hell is that even possible?
Oh no,
yeah,
make no bones about it. But he's not actually insane. He is actually, and I've said this to people before, when people laugh about Amjad Chowdhury, oh, he's a dick, he's an arse, he's an idiot. No, he's a very dangerous man who's radicalizing our children. And this is part of the problem. And I myself, when I stood for election with Police and Crime Commissioner, I came across guidelines. So this is something else I want to ask you. There's a couple of things that I want to ask before I let you go for the evening, because I know you've been driving for a long time today.
Yeah.
But I came across the guidelines, and these guidelines make special concessions for Muslims, i.e., if a police officer has to, if you have a team of officers that need to go and search a property before entering the premises, police are advised to put coverlets on their shoes first. Police are not permitted to touch the Quran or any religious artifacts without prior permission. My police, as far as I'm concerned, in my country, have to apply the law equally and fairly for all. But how do you apply a law equally and fairly for all if you issue guidelines? If you and I started a job tomorrow and we're given a set of guidelines, that's your rules. That's the rules you're going to follow for that job. That's been imposed on our police force in Bedfordshire. We've now got Bedfordshire Police and Birmingham Police saying that they would consider allowing women to wear the burqa.
The police force?
Yeah, they would. The police would allow police officers.
Yeah. So I've wore the headscarf at work before, and I find the headscarf, like, for me personally, here, for converts and stuff, it's just clothing, right? I find it fashionable, it's nice, whatever. But whenever you go to covering your face and wearing burqas at work, I think that should not be allowed. Absolutely, that's abhorrent and obnoxious and annoying, because people need interaction with you, and how are you're gonna have, you know, a face-to-face conversation? It's just like not looking somebody in the eye, right? If somebody can't see your face, it's very rude.
Well, we've literally just had a case of somebody in a burqa that stabbed an 18-year-old, and I sat there and I'm thinking, okay, I can imagine a police officer now. Can you describe this person? No. Can you describe what they were wearing?
If you want to wear the burqa and you're not working, fine, whatever. But you know, I mean, I find it personally obnoxious and annoying. If you want to wear a niqab or something, you know, when you're with your Muslim friends, okay, wear it, you know. I mean, it doesn't hurt to be Muslim around your Muslim friends in your Muslim space. But when you go out into public, you know, you shouldn't be. I find it obnoxious and annoying, and you make other people feel bad because you obviously think you're on a pedestal higher than them whenever you're wearing it, and that makes other people look bad. So for me, I don't wear it anymore, you know, unless I'm with my Muslim friends. That's it.
See, me personally, and as I said this to you before, even with the hijab, I think that the hijab, to a degree, is used as a way of highlighting, look at me, I'm a Muslim, over there is a non-Muslim. And I said to you, if you came over here and like you and I went out together, I would say to you, look, can we not put on the headscarf, because all you're doing is highlighting the fact that I happen to be not Muslim. And if we're in and around people that could want or may want to do harm, I mean, I do get a lot of death threats, as you know. I mean, you've seen some of them that I've put out. I get a lot of rape threats, a lot of threats to sodomize me. And, you know, that's highlighting that I'm not Muslim. And I do think that a lot of these girls that were targeted, they were targeted purely because they weren't Muslim and they happened to be white. And that, to me, you are separating yourself from the rest of society by wearing it. That's my personal opinion. And it's not I mean, listen, we had the Hilda Ogden days when, you know, old ladies used to wear girders and a headscarf during the war. But that wasn't for any kind of religious belief at all. That was to keep your curlies in until you took your hair out later.
Yeah.
No other reason, you know.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing that the burqa itself, to me, it's a national security issue. We've had people.
It is a national security issue, and it is very divisive and othering other people as, you know, dividing other people and labeling other people. And in identity politics, again, you know, it's to say I'm superior, you know, than than another person. So Muslims are separatist in that sense, where they feel that their culture is superior, the religion is superior, and even in public life, it is obnoxious and annoying. That's the way I view it personally. If you respect other people and you want to be peaceful, you know, you wouldn't put your religion on display to show that you're better than other people, first of all, and make other people feel bad. You would respect other people in public life, in public spaces. You would relate to them on a human level and connect with them on a human basis versus making the center of your attention your religion. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of things that people could be focusing on in life. And unfortunately for people who are not Muslim, it's thrown in their face. So the difference between Christian proselytizing is that Christians, you know, you can't see that they're Christian unless they tell you they're Christian. Muslims, they throw it in your face, you know what I'm saying? And then they are offended when people criticize that. And it's really unfortunate. And yes, people have the right to do that and practice their religion freely, but they also should know that people have the right to criticize their faith if they bring it out into the public. And that's what happens with all religions. People criticize religion. And Muslims have to learn how to tolerate that. But a lot of times we see like Muslims, they're very separatist. So they'll call somebody an Islamophobe, but they're not really into engaging with other people who are different than them. And so they're the ones who are actually separating themselves from society.
So those people that would say that, in their opinion, because you're not following it in its entirety to the letter.
Oh yeah, they'll say I'm not a Muslim. Yeah, of course. I've heard that. I've had people tell me I'm not Muslim all the time for all kinds of things. And I really don't care, because they don't get to decide for me what I believe. They don't get to decide for me what I am. And Islam, there's many different versions of Islam. Islam is not a monolith. There's no actual true Islam. It's only true by what you believe in your heart. I know Muslims, they want to believe there's a one true Islam. And for me, after learning about Islam for 12 years, there's the Pakistani Islam, there's the Arab Islam, there's the, Sufi Islam. There's so many different versions of Islam. Which one is the true Islam? There's no true Islam. It's not a monolith. So I get to decide for myself what Islam is.
There is only one Quran. It's just one. Now, I know that you've got one Quran, you've got several different hadith, and you've got the Sunnah, the Shia, the Salafi, the Wahabi, the Ahmadi, the Deobandi. You've got all these different sects of Muslims, but there is only one Islam. There is only one Quran. Now, how people decide to go out and live their lives, and whether they decide to become extreme, whether they decide to go out and start beheading people, or raping people, or attacking people because they believe that in some way their feelings have been hurt. There is still only one book. And that for me is where a lot of the problem lies, because there are reformists, like I said, Dr. Sudi Jasser. I've got immense respect for him, because I like the fact that he turned around and said, I will die for my country, I will not die for Islam. And I respect him for that. Shireen Cozy, reformist. Rahil Raza, reformist. Now, not everybody will agree with what she says. I don't agree with everything that she says, and she doesn't agree with everything I say. And it would be a boring world if we always agreed on everything. I don't want a group of yes people around me.
Yeah.
They, as I've said to them, if you can't reform the actual Quran, then how do you reform Muslims to understand that what happened historically should not be happening in today's modern society? How do we, because there are always going to be Muslims that will turn around and say the Prophet Muhammad was the perfect man, and this is the literal word of God. So therefore, we can follow it in its literal form. It's perfectly justifiable. And if you can, it doesn't matter how many Muslims you can talk to, you can change their opinions on certain things. If you can't reform the book, as in Christianity had the Old Testament and then they reformed it and they had the New Testament to take out a lot of the violence within Christianity. If we can't do that with the Quran, then we have a major problem, don't we?
Yeah, well, this is where there's so much controversy because Muslims, they live in the bubble and they think that if you change anything or you add anything that you're going to be cursed or whatever. So, but they can absolutely say, okay, this part of the Quran is a historical reference and not to be taken literally. And that's the problem, is that the teachers do not teach that these things should not be taken literally, because the Torah and the Bible have lots of violent verses in them, a lot of really bad examples with warmongering and, harming others and xenophobia stuff, But the thing is that Christians and Jews do not take that stuff literally. They're not applying it literally to their life and going attacking people or whatever. So this is where the problem lies, is that Muslims need to take ownership of their, living in this bubble and really own up to the fact that, that what they're teaching and preaching of literalism is really, really wrong. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people say, oh, this doesn't represent all Muslims. But for the most part, yes, you're right. It is the cornerstone of the problem, the root of the problem in the Muslim world. It's that it is taken literally, and there is so much scholarship around that to be literal, and it shouldn't be literal. Um, and that's
So,
because Muslims, they call it scholars, right? So the scholars are preaching the literal interpretation that it's perfect, and this is where the problem lies.
so to end on, my last question to you is going to be, first of all, I want to make it very apparent to anybody who does watch this, whether they watch it live or whether they watch it when I upload it to my Facebook or whether they watch it on YouTube at a later date, that for you to come on and put your face out there is actually an extremely brave thing to do. And as much as I know that non-Muslims, look, right now, non-Muslims have every right to be angry. And the Muslim community of both this country and America, need to understand, why do non-Muslims feel the way they do? Why are they reacting the way they're reacting? Are we intolerant, or is it a reaction? I believe we are a reaction to an action. And that anger, if we don't start addressing these very serious issues, very real issues, this anger is going to grow. And it will grow to a point where it's uncontrollable. And before you know it, there will be complete and utter civil unrest. And I genuinely believe that. So it is extremely brave of you to go live with me on social media and on YouTube, because, and this is going to be my last question to you, is how do you feel knowing that there will possibly be Muslims, and it's more likely to be Muslims than the so-called far right, if I'm honest. You'll get a few idiots, and I'll be the first to say they do exist. Nazis do exist out there. But there is a possibility that fellow Muslims will target you with hate, possible threats, etc.
Oh yeah, they've targeted me before. I've left Islam before, and I've been threatened before. For me, I'm not scared of people, and I call the police, I report things, and yeah, they don't have the right to target me. If it happens, I'll let you know. But yeah, like, I'm not afraid to speak up and speak my mind. And there's a lot of Muslims who are silenced, who feel like I do, and there's a lot of people who actually are ex-Muslims, or they leave Islam because they feel like that Islam is not tolerant towards other people's views, and they can't question the religion. So the only answer is to leave the religion. And I'm saying this as from a Muslim standpoint, that you absolutely have the right to question what you believe, and you absolutely have the right to think for yourself. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to accept everything that everybody calls Islam as Islam. You can decide for yourself. And that's why I speak up, because for me, there's parts of Islam that I agree with, and there's parts of Islam that I disagree with. And it's okay. I can criticize my faith just like you can criticize my faith. And I can criticize atheism. That's part of a free society and free thinking, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
I think the only difference is, if you criticize atheism, I'm not going to go, right, that's it. Where's my machete? I'm coming for you. I don't want you dead for criticizing Islam, for criticizing atheism. Whereas when I criticize Islam, there are many that You know, I mean, there's a friend of mine who's watching right now called Rach. And she and I for years, I mean, she's seen it where I've had images of guns, you know, 2 bangs to the head, you're dead, bitch. Those kind of things repeatedly said to me. So, you know, when I criticise Islam, they want me dead. They'll always throw into the mix, you're out of context, misinterpretation. Well, I don't think you can misinterpret when you've got the sources there. And they assume that non-Muslims weren't going to educate themselves. And we are educating ourselves, and this is where the other problem lies. We are educating ourselves and we are understanding it, and we know that we don't agree with it. But when it's shut, if it was private, kept private behind you, you know, in your privacy of your own world, not an issue. But when it's being pushed out onto the streets and we're seeing Muslims come out in masses, praying in the middle of the streets, blocking off entire streets, sometimes taking up entire car parks.
Yeah, Tony, this is religious violence and community violence. And unfortunately, in the UK, you guys are subjected to this because you guys are the other party who don't believe in what the Muslims believe there. And so if they are extremists and they do, you know, find what you say offensive, they threaten you with violence. This is community violence. And it's unfortunate that the Muslims there are that obnoxious and that they are that annoying and unpeaceful, right? Because that's definitely not peaceful behavior. And you're right, you know, I mean, they shouldn't interfere with other people's daily life. They shouldn't interfere with, you know, the way things are going there. If they come there, obviously they left their country for a reason, right? What was it for? Was it just for the money, or was it for, you know, the culture and the freedom?
A lot of them came here for the benefits. I'm not going to lie to you, mass immigration into this country and into places like Germany has literally drained our benefit system. We've got people that come over to abuse our NHS and then don't pay the bill and start off back to wherever they came from. You know, mass immigration is a major problem in this country, and we're constantly being told. There's a guy called Mohammed Ansar. In fact, I think you watched me debate him on Russia Today, where I left him looking a bit like a donut, putting it bluntly.
Yeah.
He was on a train one day and he photographed outside the window and he was like, oh, but the UK's full. And I went, and that's the green belt, you idiot. You know, if you go building a green belt, where are you going to, and these fields you're photographing, where do you think your vegetables come from, Mo? You go building on all of that, then you take away farmland. So therefore we can't farm. So then we'd have to use more countries to import vegetables and fruits from. So actually you're being a bit of a moron, Mo. And the man is an idiot. I don't think he represents people like yourself. I also don't think that his son represents people like yourself. And there's many others I don't think represent people like yourself. And I would ask that people who are on my Facebook, people that are on my YouTube or on my Twitter, I don't want people that know me, that support what I do, to be abusive towards you. I want them to understand that for you to put your face out here, to have the courage to say whether people agree with what you're saying, is they can disagree, they can put comments and they can criticize, and they can even get into a debate with you, and I have no issue with that. Yeah. Just don't be abusive towards you. I don't want people being abusive towards you, because that means that everything that's been said about people on the right would be proven right. And I will continue to support Muslim women, and that includes women like yourself. You know, I will continue to support people like you, and I will continue to work with people like yourself and Rahim, because I think that the only way we're going to change this is to empower women. That's what I believe. But I'm going to be here tonight, and I'm going to say thank you very, very much for coming on and giving me your time, and also for showing me how to do this, because I am, after all, just a dumb blonde, and I can say that because I'm allowed.
Yeah, I am too, don't worry. But yeah, this is a very good tool so that you can have other guests on, and you can have multiple people in the future too as well.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. People who do watch this and people who come on to YouTube later on, I'm going to just lastly say to all of you, if you've got a Gmail account, if you want to come on when I'm talking to people like Candace, or if I'm talking to somebody else, if you send me your Gmail account, then I can add you to the conversation. But obviously, if I'm going to interview people like Bill Warner and people like Zudu Jassa, then I've got to give them my time. But if somebody wanted to come on and ask them a question, then they could get 2 or 3 minutes, and it would be a good way of interacting. And that opens up the debate. We've got to start having this debate. If we don't, then the problem's only going to get bigger. We've got to start having these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tony, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I really do support Marias, and I know that here in the U.S. we have a little bit of a different situation. We don't have a large Muslim population, but a lot of the things that you've seen, I've seen here. And I've experienced, and I've seen other converts experience them as well, as far as being abused and raped and being trafficked into green card marriages and these types of things. And it doesn't always end well. Sometimes their kids get, kidnapped, and even a lot of Muslim women here have been abused by their relatives by making them marry other people for green cards and those types of things. And there is a gap, and there is a crack where victims fall through, especially in the Muslim community, because there is silence from leaders, there is silence from Muslim organizations, because it is taboo and they don't want to talk about these types of things. So I absolutely support what you're doing, and I think you're amazing, and keep up the good work.
I will keep up the good work. For everybody that did come on, and we won't have many because this is new, so we're not going to have that many views, but I'm also going to load this up to Facebook so it goes out on Facebook as well. But I want to say thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. And thank you for the support that you've given to Marias over the last couple of years. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.